You are listening to the Pursuit of Manliness podcast, where we are vigorously equipping men to pursue biblical manliness. For more information, make sure you visit thepursuitofmanliness.com. All right, we are continuing our solo podcast episodes for the summer months. Appreciate you guys who've submitted things that you'd like to see me talk about or us discuss on this podcast. And I'll say it again, if you have something that you would like to see talked about, shoot an email to pursuemanliness@gmail.com. I'll add it to the list. Perhaps we can get to it. Sometimes there's certain topics I go, yeah, that's low-hanging fruit. Let's just dive right into that. Others a little more involved, and in some they just don't fit, maybe the rhythm or the the season we're in at that time. And I would say this too: if you have somebody, somebody that's doing something, a good work that you say, man, that guy would be good for your podcast. Send me their information. Sometimes it's a good fit. Sometimes they respond right away. Sometimes they don't respond at all. And then sometimes there's some that you go, that's not going to work right now, but hey, send them my way or connect us, put their email in there and connect us right away. That's pretty easy as well. Guys, we're talking about today a rite of passage. This was one of the early responses I got when I said, hey, what are some things you'd like to see talked about on the podcast as we go into these summer months? And someone said rite of passage. And I thought, yeah, let's get into that. My first question I want to start with while we're fresh into this, not even 2 minutes in, is, did you ever have a rite of passage in your life? Was there anything, a ceremony, a moment, a camp trip, a line in the sand where somebody in your life invited you into that next phase of life, intentionally or unintentionally? Maybe unintentionally you go, hey, I felt like that camping trip or that journey or that road trip or whatever it was we did, that was kind of a rite of passage for me. Maybe you grabbed onto that looking back. Maybe they didn't see it that way. Did anyone do that for you? What about the guys who nobody did that for? I think that's most of us, right? Most of us did not have that welcome to manhood, welcome to this season of life. They might have said, hey, you need to go get a job. Hey, you need to either, get a job or go to school, or hey, you need to move out, or, sometimes there's that push of like, hey, you're 18 now, here's what you're going to do. But we're going to look at we're going to look at it from a little bit different perspective today. And for those guys who say, you know what, I did not have that, man, I'm hopefully going to add some tools to your toolbox. For you guys that say, oh, I had it, and man, I'm thankful for it, I would say take that model, or take what you liked about that model, and maybe consider some of the things I'm going to talk about here, and then do what works for you. You don't have to be a father to have a rite of passage for someone. However, you do have to have a relationship that's worthy of passing something on. Just because you know them, or that you are related to them, or that you think they should, adhere to what you say, that's not going to work. But I want to talk to those guys who say, you know what, I didn't have that, I wish I had it, or you know what, I didn't even consider it until you just said that right now. Or like me, I started reading some books that would talk about this rite of passage, and they would make it such this thing that was so awe-inspiring. I'm like, man, I want that. I want that for my kids. And I'm gonna share my own personal experience here on this podcast. If you guys know me well enough, I'm not gonna pretend to be the expert on this. I'm gonna tell you what I'm trying, or what I think we should do, and then you take it or leave it. It's your call where we go from there. I will give you my context. I've been married for 21 years. I have 2 daughters and I have a son. So most of what I'm saying is going to start would be from the female perspective, and I know the boys, we have this idea we're going to go out, we're going to kill an animal, and that's great too, but we can't miss it on the girls. Like, they need to know as well. If you're married, or the mom is in the picture, that's special too. I feel like they need to do their own thing. There's some things you guys could do together, but there's something unique about the dad. There's just something unique about it. And let's start with this. First and foremost, a rite of passage to any degree. And it should be biblical. I'm stopping myself. It should be biblical. Let me say this. I don't think it always just has to be one rite of passage. On January 20th, 2023, he had his rite of passage. Now, I think it's continual. And I'm going to get into that as we talk about relationships. But I don't want you to get locked into it. It has to be this ceremony where it's Knights of the Round Table and, their former Little League coach and youth pastor and all these guys are there. That's great. That's great if you can do that. But what I'm hoping we consider this rite of passage, I'm hoping it goes beyond a moment, beyond an evening. I hope it goes perhaps the rest of the time you're here on this planet. Just my thought. Let's go into this. And I'm going to give you some scriptures. I'm going to share at least 6 or 7 scriptures with you. Exodus chapter 13, verse 14. It says, "In the days to come, when your son asks, 'What does this mean?' say to him, 'With a mighty hand the Lord brought us out of Egypt and out of the land of slavery.'" So Moses is telling the people of Israel, your kids are going to have questions. Here's what I would encourage you to tell them. God delivered us. I mean, you want to write a passage, first of all, make it biblical. Hopefully you have a rite of passage in your own life where God delivered you from a life of sin. Now, please don't give them the roadmap, the blueprints, the how-tos of sin. Boy, I'll tell you what, every Friday night I used to go out. They don't need any help sinning, okay? But I think you could say, you know what? God delivered me. God redeemed me. God brought me to a place where He's sanctifying me. He's making me more like Jesus and less like myself. What a blessing it is to get to be your dad. What a blessing it is to get to be your uncle, your coach, whatever. And boy, I'm only here by the grace of God. And as Moses said, there's going to come a day where they're going to ask questions. Now, I want you to know there's going to come a day where they're asking questions and they're not out loud. They're asking questions inside going, I don't like that. How would I handle that? Or when I get married or when I get my own house, I'm not going to do it that way. How am I going to do it? So whether they're saying it out loud or internally, you just know they're watching. And that can be a really good thing. So when you consider rite of passage, you need to make sure it's biblical. Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 20, in the future, Moses says it's going to happen, right? He said it in Exodus 13. He's reminding them again, 40 years later. Exodus 13, they just got brought out of Egypt. Deuteronomy 6, Moses says, I'm going to give you the longest sermon in the history of sermons because I do not get to go into the promised land. Deuteronomy 6, verse 20, in the future, when your son asks you, what is the meaning of the stipulations, decrees, and laws the Lord our God has commanded you? He says, when your kid gets older and starts asking you questions about God, be ready. Again, it's got to be biblical. I'm a firm believer that if your kid, or anybody for that matter, ask you a question about God or the Bible and you don't know, it is okay to say, I don't know. Or let's figure that out together. Don't wing it, okay? Or tell them what you do know about God. Moses says in the future, when your son, well, let's change that. When your daughters, when your kids, when your nieces or nephews or whoever, whatever it is, I don't know what it is for you. When they ask you, what is the meaning of the stipulations, decrees, and laws? When they ask you, what is the meaning of the 10 Commandments? What is the meaning of the parable of the sower? What is the meaning of the Great Commission? What is the meaning of the Sermon on the Mount? Be ready. Get yourself equipped. Get yourself ready so that when the next generation starts looking to you, and there's always somebody looking to you, you're prepared. Psalm chapter 78, verses 6 through 7. So the next generation would know them, even the children yet to be born. The children yet to be born. Seems like we're always talking about the children yet to be born, aren't we? And they in turn would tell their children, the children yet to be born. Maybe for some of you guys, it's your future grandchildren and the children that in turn would be born to them, that they would put their trust in God, verse 7, and would not forget His deeds, but would keep His commands. What a privilege God has given us to represent Him here on this planet. Don't punt on it. Don't ignore it. When you consider a rite of passage, you got your son, you're saying, man, he's getting to that age. Or maybe you feel like you've passed that age. There's a lot of guys that feel that way. Don't lose hope. Hang on. Stay with me here. First of all, make sure it's biblical. You can take them to every major league ballpark in America and say, that was our thing, that was our rite of passage. You can get them to go to your alma mater and be at that university and root for that sports team and do all the things and enjoy the same rock music or country music or get the same interest in hobbies and stuff. That's great, but if it's not biblical, it's an empty pursuit. We've said before, we shouldn't strive to make another version of ourselves. We should strive to be a disciple who makes disciples. So your kid, inevitably, even though it's your kid, or maybe it's your stepkid, doesn't matter. They're going to have their own personality traits that are different than yours. That's a good thing. Because if it's biblical, that's your starting point. Exodus 13, you were delivered. You were brought out of your own Egypt. You were brought out of your own slavery to sin, right? Deuteronomy 6, they're fixing on going into the promised land. You're thinking about, how do we do this? How are we going to share? There's going to be some questions. 40-year difference there. You got a 40-year difference time you were delivered and the time that you're having this conversation? Some people do. Psalm 78, the next generation. Oh, that's too small. The generation after the next generation. This is a multi-generational mindset, okay? First and foremost, if you're going to have any form of rite of passage for anybody, and maybe you're just going to do one for yourself. You're like, you know what, doggone it, that never happened for me. No one ever gave me a special knife. No one ever took me to it. Do it for yourself. You say, you know what, God, this is a line in the sand moment. I'm not going back. I'm doing my own rite of passage because, as I said, it's hard to lead someone on a path you've never been yourself. You could say, how do I get to the Grand Canyon? I'm like, I don't know, drive till you find a big hole in the ground. Drive which way? Well, for me, I think I have to go west. Okay, so I go west. Well, you live in California, you'll end up in Russia. I don't know. I don't know how it's going to work, okay? But I'd say I can't lead you there because I've never been there myself. So I'm going to go there. You know what? I'm going to do my own rite of passage. Now, don't have a midlife crisis. Don't be that guy. I don't want no wives going, hey, why did my husband just go buy a new car because he said it was his rite of passage? No. I want you to understand this. You do not get to decide how you are remembered. You do not get to decide how you are remembered, but you do get to decide your effort. I do get to decide my intentionality. I'll give you an example. Probably about 4 Christmases ago, I gave my oldest daughter this suitcase looking thing. It was vintage looking. I thought it was cool, and we filled it with books that we thought would be perfect to move her from like a 12-year-old girl to a young woman. It was overwhelming for her and for us. It was impractical. I went to the Christian bookstore with my wife when we had one back then, and I bought any book. If my wife picked it up, was interested, I'm like, just give it to us. It was too much. It was too much. And here's why. Here's the deal. Here's the tension. Number 2, it has to be relational. You can have a Knights of the Round Table moment, and you can have a plaque, and you can have all those things, and you can take pictures, and you can have a videographer, and you can do that, but it has to be relational. You can't force someone to connect with your rite of passage if you don't have a relationship with them. You just can't. You have to cultivate that relationship. And I say this because there are guys, I just believe you got a son, he's 30, he's 40, maybe he's 50, and you go, man, I wish I could, or I would like to, and I really blew it. If you get yourself right before God, which is our first aspect, biblical, and you start to work on number 2, you start to cultivate the relationship, that may come. But don't make it for a lack of effort, right? That may come. You have to make it has to be relational. That box of books wasn't real relational. I had this idea that, here she might be at college someday, she'd have an apartment, she'd be married, whatever, and she'd have this box, and she would always look at it, and the books that we went through together, there was no plan to go through the books. It was too much. I don't even know where the books are at. I think the box might still be in a room. I could be wrong, but it wasn't relational. I was trying to say, well, this is what you're going to do. And I got to be honest, that was 4 years ago. I was still kind of getting my sea legs when it came to really cultivating a relationship the right way with my wife and kids. I really was. And I thought, well, buy all the books. That's not going to work. What I think here, when you think of rite of passage, I want to offer this idea up, and you chew on it. You decide what you're going to do it. Instead of having one magical, momentous, Instagram-worthy, videography paid moment, why don't you have several rites of passage? If you have several rites of passage, it actually takes pressure off the box of books moments. Because if I have several rites of passage, let me just give you some. A rite of passage might be 12 to 13 years old. You're now a teenager. Okay, well then maybe give them something that represents moving into the teenage years. For a boy, it might be like a wallet to put his license in. For a girl, maybe it's a purse. My girls have always had purses. I don't know. Maybe it's taking them, get their ears pierced, buy new shoes. I don't know. I'm not good at that. But maybe there's something there. How about when they start driving? Maybe there's a rite of passage there. You taught them to drive. You survived it. They're driving. I don't know. Maybe there's a rite of passage when they're dating. I'm going to go back to this one. We just started entering this world here, dating. Maybe number 3, there's a rite of passage when they get married. I see a lot of people go, oh, just wait till you that honeymoon. Oh, just wait. There's a lot of hecklers out there. Don't be a heckler. If you listen to this podcast and you're pursuing biblical manliness, you're for people. You're not against them. I can't stand it when people do that. That moves me to my next one, parenting. It's right there. Marriage, parenting. You just wait till they're 2. Just wait till they're 5. Just wait till they go to school. Just wait. So you're telling me that you failed at that age is what you're telling me. You're telling me that you barely survived it. Or how about you tell them, you know what, I'm praying for you. When your kid gets 10, I want you to come back to me and say, this is what I'm praying about. Or here's what I wish someone would have told me. Now, I know I've given people advice on, hey, here's what I learned when my kid was a baby. And then you could tell looking at their eyeballs and they ain't paying attention. That's fine. Who cares? You tried. Don't root against them. Just wait till they're 14. Just wait till the boys come around. Just wait till you're no good. I don't need more hecklers. I got enough people in my life heckling me, right? You know what? Maybe that rite of that passage when they're parenting, you just come alongside them and say, what do you need me to do? You need me to fold some laundry? You need me to mow your grass? You need me to wash your car? Here's some cash. Here's a card in the mail just to tell you you're doing a great job. I know a lot of people that just wish that their parents would tell them, hey, I'm proud of you, man. I'm proud of you, right? Like I can admit to my kids right now, and I'll probably do it till the day I die, I didn't get this all figured out. I made plenty of mistakes, and I am sorry for that. Now, I'm trying. I think I did some things good, but hey, maybe there's a rite of passage when they get saved. We clap, we take the picture, we give them the shirt, we give them a book, whatever. I was at a church where they would take them to this room. It was so cool. And they would do communion right there. First time as a baptized believer, like with their parents and whatever. Man, you could create several rites of passage. First time they catch a fish. First time they zip line, whatever, man. You capture these moments and say, we are going to be intentional about them. So we've built several through the years, because if you give me a rite of passage and say, welcome to being a man, and you give me 10 great quotes and 10 great men and whatever, what happens when I'm in the middle of the night and my kid won't stop crying, they're colicky, and I ain't got no sleep, and I ain't got any gas in the tank to go drive them around, and there's no money in savings because that's all depleted. What happens then? My point is, let's continue to cultivate the relationship. If it matters once, it should matter all the time. If the relationship matters once, to make a big deal about it, man, maybe consider doing it all the time. I'm not trying to scoff at those big time rites of passage. But I do think our approach to this should be a continual process. I'll go back to what I said a minute ago about dating. We didn't even joke about boyfriend and girlfriend. We didn't. And didn't even, there was some boys through the years that, hey, they want to meet you, Mr. Samuels. I'm like, I don't hang around 6th grade boys. I'm not doing that. So we didn't. But recently, my oldest, that started to happen. And so there's a boy that she's dating, and we met with him. We met with his dad, and not to get all into it, but we just had a conversation. And one of the parts of the conversation I said to him and to her was, I don't know where this thing goes. Obviously, we're just starting this thing. But what I told to him, whether you're in our life for 5 minutes or 55 years, I do believe I have a responsibility to you to pour into you. That doesn't mean other guys in his life haven't done that. I'm not minimizing that. But I'm saying, as the father of this girl, yes, I do believe God has put me in a position where I want to pour into you as well, but let's do it collectively so then I can pour into you and to pour into her. And I told him that, about 10, 12 years ago, whatever it was, I think it was almost 12, I read this book, and if you're watching, I'm holding it up. I've talked about it before. It may even be on my website. I don't know. It's What He Must Be. if he wants to marry my daughter by Vody Bauckham Jr. And listen, we've met, and the point was we're going to meet once a month. We're going to go through this book. I still have my original copy. It's covered in Post-it notes and all marked up, and it's a mess. I told him, I said, I know we're not talking marriage here. I know that. Listen, I used to date, and you think, oh, I'm going to marry this person. Maybe, maybe not. But nevertheless, whether they get married or they marry someone else or they stay single the rest of their life, at least we're trying to have a conversation with them about this. I take them out to eat. We eat a good meal. We have some conversation. We pray. We leave. That's it. There's an investment there. Maybe someday one of them or both of them will take some people through something like this. Maybe it's not this book. This will be outdated by then. Maybe it's a different resource. Nevertheless, to me, this is a rite of passage into dating. I didn't have that. I don't know if I'd be open to it. I don't know. And every time we meet, and they can tell you this, I tell them, I am really proud of you guys for doing this. There's not a lot of 16-year-olds who would sit at a table with a guy like me going through a book like that, having this conversation. There's just not. Thank you for doing this, and I look forward to it. Of course, I like good food too. So, again, continual process. Here's the third part. It's practical. It's practical. 1 Samuel chapter 2, verse 26, and the boy Samuel continued to grow in stature and in favor with the Lord and with people. He grew up. His relationship with God was cultivated. His relationship with people was cultivated. Some of you guys need to teach your kids how to cultivate a relationship with people, how to shake a hand, how to look them in the eyeballs. He said you're going to continue to grow. Luke chapter 2, verse 52, and Jesus grew in wisdom and stature and favor with God and man. He learned how to carry himself amongst people. That's a good thing. You know, Proverbs 22:6, train up a child in the way they should go. When they get older, they won't depart from it. Some of you guys are saying, hey, I trained my child in the way they should go, and they've departed from it. This isn't a foolproof plan, right? None of this stuff is. It doesn't change the fact that we're to train up a child in the way they should go. And maybe you come to faith later in life and your kids are already grown and you're like, man, I blew it and I'll never get it back. If they were 25 when you came to Christ, it may take another 25 years for them to start to see that as well. Stay with it, man, one day at a time. Just one day at a time. Stay with it. It will be worth it. 1 Kings chapter 2, verse 2, I'm about to go the way of all the earth, so be strong. Act like a man. This is David to Solomon. Observe what the Lord your God requires. Walk in obedience. Keep his decrees and commands, his laws, his regulations, as written in the law of Moses. I mean, we'll go back to the biblical part. It's practical. It doesn't have to be hard. They're going to get older. As they get older, continue to have these conversations. My son is 9. These are conversations we're having all the time. The other night I said, you need to talk to God about help me have faith in you and help me obey. He's struggling. We all are. We all were at times, right? We all are at times. And so we're having these conversations. We're going through stuff with him. All three of our kids, they're all very different. They're all very unique, right? So the rite of passage, I don't think is a one-size-fits-all. What I would encourage you to do is look at your kid and say, what do they need from me right now? How could I impart that on them? Don't bring them in the room tonight and go, all right, here's what we're fixing on doing. Take some time. Develop this a little bit. Maybe have a conversation. Hey, here's something I would like to do. Here's something I would like to start. Here's something I'd like to try. Say try, because you know what? You've never done this before, more than likely. And if you have, what worked with one kid may not work with the next kid. And we're not always talking about our own kids. Again, you can have this rite of passage with people in your life, but you got to have the relationship. You really have to have the relationship. The single mom whose kid's been coming to your church and you're a small group leader, just because you're the only male in his life doesn't mean you're the rite of passage guy. Okay, get that. Now you can have moments. You can be very intentional, but please don't go, hey, I'd like to take your son for a weekend of rite of passage. She's like, get away from me, creep. Okay? And I don't think it matters what age your kids are, or grandkids for that matter. But if they are your grandkids, just know they're your grandkids. They're not your kids. Okay? So you're going to need the blessing from your son or daughter, whoever you got in your life, right? You're going to need their blessing because you're their grandparent. You're not the parent. It's different. It's different. So we're talking mostly this whole idea, to me, parent, kid. That's how I see it. And the kid doesn't have to be 7 or 17. They could be 57 if God has allowed you to do that. We're not talking about imparting sage advice or knighting them. We're not trying to bring them into a secret society. We're talking about making an intentional interest, an intentional investment in that particular season of life You're guiding them. They have to go too now towards understanding God's grace and truth while you're continually strengthening that relational bond. This should help strengthen the bond, not sever it. And this should help strengthen the bond, not create it. The bond has to be in the works. There has to be something there for this to happen. Again, you take them on the greatest camping trip that humanity's ever known. They're like, I really don't know you that well. You don't spend any time with me. You have no idea what I'm into. You don't even know my hobbies. You don't know my friends. You don't know anything about me. Well, that's going to be rough. I want to wrap up with this. We do not get to determine how we are remembered, but we do get to determine our amount of effort. People are going to upset you. Your kids are going to upset you. People are going to let you down. Your kids are going to let you down. People are going to hurt your feelings. Your kids are going to hurt your feelings. You do the same for all other people. Maybe at the end of the day, it all comes down to you just getting to know them. Just trying to get to know them. As you get to know them, and as you're pursuing the heart of Jesus, you've established, number one, what I invest in them will be biblical. As I'm getting myself right with Christ and I'm developing that, then I move into that relational aspect. I want to move the relationship from here to here. They don't want to take a long road trip with you if they don't know who you are, or if they have no relationship with you. Or you just come knocking on their door one day and going, hey, I want to talk about something. That's just not going to work. So it needs to be biblical, it needs to be relational, and the last part has to be practical. This is something you can do for their entire life. You got to decide, what season of life are my kids in? What season of life am I in? What could I cultivate? What could I establish? And ask the Holy Spirit to lead you. God loves those kids and grandkids or great-grandkids or kids yet not born more than you ever will. Say, God, you have strategically placed me in their life. How can I make sure I keep this about you while investing in them so that someday when I'm gone, perhaps they can do that for other people? Amen? Guys, think about that. Consider that. I'd love to hear from you guys if you have had this or if you're trying something. Man, if something the next year or two, whatever, if something happens, go, hey, write a passage. Man, make that the title of the email and say, hey, this is what I'm trying to do right now. I'd love to hear from you, man. I'd love to cheer you on and say, good for you. Good for you. Stay with it. Amen? That's it for me, man. I'll talk to you in a bit. Thank you for listening to the Pursuit of Manliness podcast. If you would, make sure to visit iTunes and leave a 5-star review to let others know what you think of this show. When you get a chance, make sure to visit thepursuitofmanliness.com to see what is available in the gear store, find more information out about Tribe, and much more. Thanks for listening, and let's keep pursuing biblical manliness.